So it's February 11th, 2026,
Okay.
and it's about 8:04 in the morning. Picture you're on the northbound lanes of North Dixie Highway.
Down in Lake Worth Beach, Florida, right?
Exactly, Lake Worth Beach. And a driver gets pulled over for what is like one of the most common everyday infractions we have on the books right now.
Texting while driving.
Right, texting while driving.
Yeah.
So the officer approaches the window, and he's super specific about the violation. Like, he states point blank that the driver was using a phone in her right hand.
Right. And there's a pretty massive problem with that observation.
A huge problem, because the driver, who is this 36-year-old adaptive athlete, was born without a right hand.
Yeah. It's physically impossible.
Literally impossible.
Yeah.
So, welcome to the Deep Dive. We're thrilled to have you, the listener, at the table with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome in.
Because today we are looking at an incident that, honestly, it forces us to question the entire bedrock of how our administrative systems and our legal systems process, well, physical reality.
Yeah, and we have a really formidable stack of sources to help us make sense of this today.
We do. We've got an in-depth Emerald Book case study of the whole incident.
We also have a New York Times report that we got via GV Wire.
Right. And then some really comprehensive legal analyses from a couple of Florida injury firms. That's Ilabaca Law and the Law Office of Stephen G. Lafley.
Plus, we have technical reviews of the raw body cam footage from Autoblog, which is crucial here.
Super crucial, because our mission today is to take all this material, extract the core insights, and try to understand how an objective physical impossibility got codified into an official legal citation.
Right, because I think the initial assumption, if you just see this scrolling on your feed, is that it's merely a story about a viral mistake.
Yeah, like a momentary lapse in observation on the side of the road.
Exactly. But the reality, as we dig into all this documentation, is way more complex. We are looking at a multi-layered failure here.
Oh, totally. We're looking at the mechanics of human psychology, right? Like how the brain could just stubbornly reject the evidence of its own eyes.
Yeah, and we're dissecting these massive structural gaps in American police training methodologies.
And don't forget the labyrinth of Florida's distracted driving statutes. It's a mess.
Oh, it's a total maze. And then there's the bureaucratic friction, which just seems designed to make correcting an obvious state error like an exhausting ordeal for the average citizen.
Okay, let's unpack this. We really need to look closely at the anatomy of the stop itself.
Yeah, the actual body cam footage is where this all starts.
Right, because the specific dialogue captured on that video sets the stage for every single systemic issue we're going to talk about today.
So the driver is Kathleen Thomas. She goes by Katie.
Right, Katie. And she's driving her Volkswagen SUV.
And as we mentioned, she has a congenital limb difference. Her right arm ends just below the elbow.
Exactly. So the officer who pulls her over is a deputy from the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. He's driving this marked Ford Mustang GT.
Which is often used for, like, targeted traffic enforcement.
Right, targeted distracted driving enforcement. So he walks up to the window, and there is just no ambiguity in his statement.
None at all.
He leans in and he says, quote, "You drove past me holding the phone with your right hand, manipulating that phone. I mean, I saw you," end quote.
Yeah, he isn't just suggesting she seemed distracted. He is establishing an absolute rock-solid assertion.
Right, an assertion of literal specificity. He's claiming visual confirmation of a right hand operating a device.
And that specificity is the absolute linchpin of this entire interaction.
Totally. Because common sense would tell you that if someone presents a physical impossibility to you, it should instantly resolve the misidentification.
Right. Like, oops, my bad. Have a good day.
Exactly. And Katie Thomas, to her credit, responds with this really understandable level of amusement. Like, she actually giggles a bit.
Yeah, she lifts her residual limb, points out the obvious physical reality, and just asks, can we just call this a day?
Which is so reasonable. In a purely logical environment, the deputy's brain registers that new visual data.
Right. He realizes his initial observation was flawed.
He apologizes, turns around, and goes back to his Mustang.
But that is not what happens. Instead, the interaction entirely bypasses logic. It enters this weird phase of, like, psychological entrenchment.
Yes, this is where it gets crazy. The deputy actually initiates a moral test to validate his original flawed premise.
The hand-to-God moment.
Oh my gosh, the hand-to-God moment. This is the part of the Autoblog footage review that completely defies any sort of rational expectation.
It really does.
The deputy is looking directly at her missing limb, and he asks her to swear, quote, "Hand to God you didn't have a phone in your hand."
And Katie, who is still seemingly trying to de-escalate this total absurdity with humor, she raises her right residual limb in that traditional oath gesture.
Right. She raises it up and says, "Hand to God."
And how does the deputy respond?
He flatly rejects it. He literally says, "The other hand to God." He forces her to use her left hand, which is her only hand, to swear the oath.
It's just wild.
I mean, wait. He is looking right at a physical void where a hand should be, and his brain simply refuses to process the void. How does a trained professional's brain just reject reality like that?
Well, it is a profound rejection of reality, for sure.
It's like looking at a clear blue sky and insisting it's neon green just because your weather app told you so.
That's a great way to put it. What's fascinating here is that we are observing a real-time, fully documented failure of cognitive flexibility.
Cognitive flexibility, okay, explain that.
So, the deputy's brain has constructed a narrative, and when contradictory physical evidence is introduced, his brain doesn't treat it as a helpful correction.
It treats it as a threat.
Exactly, it's a threat to that established narrative. This brings up the first major theme of our deep dive today.
Which is?
The incredible danger that arises when procedural momentum and the preservation of someone's occupational ego supersedes observable reality.
It supersedes basic human context.
Precise.
It is essentially real-world autocomplete. You know what I mean? Like when you are typing on your phone, the software predicts the next word based on patterns.
Oh, right. Like if you type happy, it automatically suggests birthday.
Exactly. The visual processing centers in our brains must be doing something really similar.
They absolutely do.
Because think about it. A deputy parked on the side of a highway, scanning vehicles that are zipping past at 40 miles an hour. He only has a fraction of a second to absorb visual data.
Right. It's an incredibly short window.
And if he is out there specifically hunting for distracted drivers, his brain is already primed. It's looking for certain shapes and movements.
An elbow elevated, maybe a head tilted down slightly.
Or an object held up near the steering wheel.
Yeah.
So his brain sees Katie's residual limb elevated near the wheel, and it just auto-completes the image with a phone.
Because that is the visual pattern he has been actively hunting for all morning.
Exactly. But the crazy part is, once the brain hits send on that observation, it refuses to unsend it.
The autocomplete metaphor perfectly captures the mechanics of what psychologists call cognitive anchoring.
Cognitive anchor.
Yeah, the initial split-second visual assessment becomes the anchor.
Okay.
The psychological friction, that tension we see on the video, occurs when the physical reality of the actual traffic stop clashes with that pre-established anchor.
I see. So for the deputy to actually acknowledge the missing limb, he has to simultaneously admit something really uncomfortable to himself.
Right. He has to acknowledge that his authoritative observation was basically a hallucination generated by his own perceptual shortcuts.
Oh, wow. I never thought of it that way. It's like walking into a dark room, seeing a shadow in the corner, and your brain instantly insists it's an intruder.
Yeah, exactly.
And even after you flick on the lights and see it's just your coat rack, your brain is still panicking. But instead of laughing it off and calming down, you actually arrest the coat rack.
That's hilarious, but it's fundamentally what's happening here. In high-stress, authority-driven professions like policing, acknowledging a perceptual failure feels deeply destabilizing.
It's a hit to the ego.
More than just ego, the nervous system often interprets this cognitive dissonance as a direct threat to the individual's professional identity. It feels like a threat to their actual command of the situation.
Which naturally triggers a defensive response rather than a corrective one.
Precisely. And you can actually track that defensiveness in his language as the stop progresses.
Oh, you really can.
Right.
He starts out with this definitive accusation about the right hand.
Right.
But then, when he's confronted with the physical impossibility of her having a right hand, he immediately shifts the goalposts.
He alters his phrasing.
Yeah, he changes it to a hand. He says, "I saw you with a phone in your hand. You had a hand up."
He dilutes his original accusation.
He does it in this desperate attempt to preserve the foundational justification for pulling her over in the first place. He is literally trying to force the physical reality to bend to his cognitive anchor.
And he attempts to force that compliance by shifting the burden of proof entirely onto the driver.
Right, making her swear the oath.
Exactly. The demand that she swear an oath, and specifically the demand that she use a standard hand for that oath. It's an exercise in extracting validation.
To make himself feel right.
Yeah. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the occupational conditioning of law enforcement in America heavily emphasizes the maintenance of command presence.
Command presence. Yeah, you hear that term a lot.
Right. The underlying philosophy that's often imported during their training is that the officer must dictate the flow and the terms of every single encounter.
Which leaves zero room for collaboration or listening.
Exactly. Admitting a fundamental error on the side of the road is frequently, and falsely, I should add, equated with surrendering authority, or worse, compromising situational control and officer safety.
So this psychological doubling down, it doesn't just happen in a vacuum.
No, it doesn't.
It is the direct output of a training curriculum that prioritizes physical control over cognitive adaptability.
That's exactly right.
And the data provided in the Emerald Book Source regarding the U.S. Bureau of Justice statistics paints a very, very clear picture of how this mindset is manufactured.
Let's get into those numbers because they are staggering.
They really are. Listen to this. The average American police recruit receives approximately 806 hours of basic training.
806 hours.
Yeah. That translates to roughly 20 weeks of instruction. 20 weeks before they are given a badge, a gun, and placed in a patrol car.
And the allocation of those 806 hours reveals the true systemic priorities of the institution.
Oh, it is overwhelmingly skewed toward managing physical confrontation.
Right?
According to the stats, recruits spend, on average, 73 hours on firearms proficiency, and then another 64 hours on defensive tactics.
So a massive chunk of their time is spent on physical force.
Exactly. The curriculum is heavily weighted toward using force, surviving ambushes, establishing physical dominance.
And what about the softer skills?
Well, the time dedicated to de-escalation techniques or ethical decision-making, or even just navigating interactions with individuals possessing physical or cognitive disabilities.
Right.
It is an alarmingly small fraction of that 20-week window.
It's practically an afterthought.
We are functionally training people for combat, and then we are deploying them to manage complex, nuanced civic interactions.
And the deficit in this training model becomes starkly apparent when we apply a little comparative analysis.
Right. Think about your own job. If you were only given 20 weeks of training, and most of it was on how to fight, how would you react when faced with a nuanced, confusing interpersonal situation?
You'd probably default to what you know, but the sources highlight a really wild comparison here regarding licensing requirements.
Oh, the cosmetology stat, yeah.
Yes. In states like Illinois, to legally cut hair and apply chemical treatments to a client, the state requires 1,500 classroom hours.
1,500 hours.
A cosmetologist receives nearly double the instructional hours of a police academy graduate.
That is just, it's hard to wrap your head around.
It really is.
And when you pull the lens back even further and look at international standards, the American model looks less like an academy and more like a crash course.
It absolutely does.
In nations like Germany and Finland, law enforcement training is this rigorous, multi-year academic and practical endeavor.
We're talking years, not weeks.
Right. Recruits there spend 2.5 to 3 years in training.
Wow.
They are earning actual university degrees in criminal justice, sociology, and law. They are studying the psychological mechanics of crisis intervention right alongside their tactical maneuvers.
And it's not just Europe. Even in Japan, the system requires 15 to 21 months of intensive holistic training before an officer is ever permitted to patrol a sector alone.
So they have time to actually learn how to interact with the public.
Exactly. Those extended timelines in European and Asian models allow for the development of that cognitive flexibility we were discussing earlier.
Right.
When an officer spends 3 years studying constitutional law, sociology, and psychology, their default response to a confusing roadside interaction is analytical.
They assess the situation. They ask questions.
Yes. But when an officer is only given 20 weeks of training, and it's heavily focused on surviving violent encounters, their default response to confusion is often just to reassert command presence.
To dominate the situation.
Right. This skewed curriculum cultivates what critics refer to as the warrior mentality.
The warrior mentality.
The officer is conditioned to view every single unknown variable as a potential threat to their control, rather than just a puzzle that requires clarification.
Well, I mean, if your primary professional tools are a sidearm, defensive tactics, and an unyielding command presence, you are going to treat every interaction like a nail waiting for a hammer.
That's exactly what happens.
Adapting to a driver with a limb difference, who is politely pointing out a physical impossibility that requires an officer to step entirely out of the command and control script.
It requires them to be human for a second.
Yes. It requires them to engage in a horizontal human interaction rather than a vertical authoritative one.
And the deputy in Florida couldn't make that pivot because the system never gave him the bandwidth to learn how.
He fell back on exactly what he was taught. Escalate the interaction to maintain control, issue the citation, and let the courts sort it out.
But issuing the citation, however, introduces the next layer of systemic failure here.
Oh, this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, because the deputy's attempt to enforce the law actually revealed a profound misunderstanding of the law itself.
The laws in Florida are so incredibly convoluted.
The statutory framework governing distracted driving in Florida is just incredibly fragmented.
It's a mess.
The legal analyses we have from Ilabaka Law and Stephen G. Lovely meticulously dissect the specific codes involved here, and they demonstrate that the citation was legally void from the moment the deputy began writing it.
Legally void from the start.
Okay.
So let's break down these statutes because it's fascinating.
So the deputy cited Katie Thomas under Florida statute section 316.305.
Okay, 316.305.
That is the state's general texting while driving law. But if you look at the structural design of this law, the contradiction is immediately apparent.
Because Florida essentially operates under two entirely different sets of rules depending on the exact geographic coordinates of your vehicle.
Right, it's totally location dependent.
So section 316.305 applies to general roadways, like North Dixie Highway, where this stop happened.
Right.
Now, in 2019, this was actually elevated to a primary offense.
Meaning they can pull you over just for that.
Exactly. And it carries a $30 base fine for a first-time violation.
But the crucial detail, the thing that makes this whole stop fall apart legally, is the evidentiary threshold required to actually enforce it.
Yeah, the threshold is remarkably high. Because under section 316.305, it is entirely legal to hold a mobile device in your hand.
Let me repeat that because people always get this wrong. It is legal to hold the phone.
Yes, an individual can hold their phone to their ear for a conversation.
You can hold it in front of their face on speakerphone.
Or they can just hold it to view GPS navigation. All of that is perfectly legal on a general roadway.
So what does the officer actually have to prove?
To secure a valid citation under this specific statute, the law enforcement officer must be able to articulate and prove that the driver was actively, manually typing, entering, or reading text-based data for non-voice interpersonal communication.
So the officer essentially has to prove manual data entry.
Yes, manual data entry.
Which is incredibly hard to do from a moving vehicle.
Exactly. Now, if the citation software doesn't differentiate these nuances, which we'll get into, the officer still has the responsibility to know the law.
But the deputy explicitly stated on the body cam, quote, "I saw you holding a phone."
Right. And under section 316.305, the action he verbally described is not even a violation of the statute.
Exactly. The action he described is entirely legal.
So wait, is there anywhere in Florida where just holding the phone is illegal?
Yes, there is. The only scenario where the mere act of holding a device constitutes a violation is under a completely different statute. Florida statute section 316.306. Ah, okay. 316.306.
This section enforces a strict hands-free mandate, meaning you cannot hold the phone at all.
Well, it's geographically restricted, right?
Yes. It only applies to designated school crossings, active school zones, and active work or construction zones where personnel are visibly present.
And violating that section carries a heavier penalty, right?
Yeah, it's a $60 base fine, and it immediately assesses 3 points against your driver's license.
Okay, so let's apply this bifurcated two-statute legal reality to the actual traffic stop in Lake Worth Beach.
The deputy's position just collapses entirely.
It does, because the stop occurred on a standard section of a northbound highway.
The citation did not indicate the presence of a school zone.
There was no active construction zone mentioned.
Consequently, section 316.306, the strict hands-free one, is entirely inapplicable.
The deputy is completely bound by the parameters of section 316.305.
Which means he must prove she was actively typing.
And he is alleging she was typing with a right hand she does not possess.
Right. And, okay, even if we play devil's advocate and construct a purely hypothetical scenario where she was holding a phone in her left hand.
Right, her existing hand.
The deputy would still need superhuman visual acuity to confirm she was actively typing text characters from the vantage point of a moving patrol vehicle.
It's just not physically possible to see that level of detail. Furthermore, the deputy lacks the legal authority to even verify a suspicion on the scene.
Oh, because of privacy law.
Exactly. Florida law maintains really robust electronic privacy protections. An officer cannot just seize your mobile device on the side of the road to inspect your text message timestamps or your browser history.
Not without a warrant, right?
Right. They need a digitally signed warrant from a judge unless the incident involves a crash resulting in death or severe bodily injury.
Which this obviously wasn't.
So the deputy had no physical proof, no legal mechanism to obtain proof, and he was attempting to enforce a standard of holding a device that legally did not even apply to that stretch of road.
It is so fascinating to look at the legislative context surrounding this, too. The FinLaw analysis points out that in 2025, Florida lawmakers actually introduced a bill intended to implement a comprehensive statewide ban on all handheld phone use.
To erase those confusing geographic distinctions.
Exactly, to just make it hands-free everywhere. But that bill failed.
So it didn't pass.
It didn't pass.
Yeah.
So the deputy was aggressively asserting his authority to enforce a universal hands-free law that the state legislature had explicitly refused to enact.
And he was accusing a citizen of violating it using an appendage that physically did not exist.
Well, you cannot make this up. It's wild. So when an error of this magnitude is captured on video and it gets distributed to an audience of tens of millions online, the administrative response from the agency becomes a huge focal point of public scrutiny.
Oh, yeah. Everyone wants to know how the department is going to explain a legally and physically impossible ticket.
And the official statement from the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office regarding the dismissal of the citation, honestly, it is a masterclass in bureaucratic deflection.
They didn't really take responsibility, did they?
No, they blamed the user interface.
The software.
Yes. The official statement claimed that while the deputy made a, quote, visual observation, unquote, the charge was ultimately withdrawn due to the totality of the circumstances.
Which is a classic law enforcement catch-all phrase.
Totally. But then they specifically pointed to a, quote, lack of clarity on how violations are labeled in our citation software.
So they basically argued that the drop-down menus on the computer in the patrol car were too confusing.
Yes. It is the bureaucratic equivalent of a self-checkout machine freezing at the grocery store.
How do you mean?
Like when the screen locks up and won't let you avoid an accidental double scan, and there isn't an employee anywhere in sight to help you.
Right, you're just stuck there staring at the screen.
Exactly. You might just go ahead and buy the $100 caviar that accidentally scanned just to escape the store and go home.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Except in this context, the officer is locking a citizen into the criminal justice system because the software interface lacks specificity.
While citing the software may appear to be a convenient method of shielding the deputy from direct accountability, it actually does illuminate a genuine structural flaw.
A flaw in how policing relies on technology.
Right. Modern policing is heavily mediated by these mobile data terminals in the cars, and those systems are designed for speed and efficiency, not legal nuance.
They just want to pump out the tickets.
Exactly. If the software just presents a unified, generic category for distracted driving, without forcing the officer to distinguish between the high-threshold typing ban of 316.305 and the strict holding ban of 316.306.
Then it actively facilitates statutory errors.
Yes. The technology essentially flattens complex legal codes into simple checkboxes.
But come on, the software didn't force the deputy to ignore a missing limb.
No, it certainly didn't.
The software didn't demand the hand-to-God oath.
Yeah.
The drop-down menu is an accessory to the error, not the cause.
That's a very fair point.
The real cause is the administrative inertia that kicks in once the officer begins generating the paperwork.
Because once that process starts, stopping it is a nightmare.
Exactly. Canceling a citation on the side of the road is a massive administrative headache. It requires calling a supervisor over the radio, voiding sequentially tracked state documents, and submitting written narratives explaining why you messed up.
The system is quite literally designed to make reversing an error difficult.
Which leads to this pervasive law enforcement reflex, where they just issue the citation and tell the citizen, hey, just fight it in court.
I hate that phrase. It is deeply problematic from a civil rights perspective.
It totally transfers the entire burden of correcting a state-generated error onto the shoulders of the innocent citizen.
The state possesses the authority, the funding, and the legal machinery. The citizen has a job, a family, and very limited resources.
And the timeline of Katie Thomas's ordeal perfectly illustrates how this system weaponizes fatigue against the citizen.
Let's walk through that timeline.
Okay, so the citation was issued on February 11th.
Right.
It wasn't officially dismissed until late May.
Over 3 months.
For over 3 months, she was entangled in this bureaucracy. She had to formally file a plea of not guilty with the county court.
which takes time and effort.
Then, she was required to log in and attend mandatory online court hearings.
And she had to get the video herself, didn't she?
Yes, she had to dedicate hours to navigating the county's public records request system just to obtain the body cam footage that unequivocally proved her innocence.
The system essentially relies on the assumption that most people will simply give up.
Totally. If she hadn't been persistent, and if she hadn't utilized the media leverage of the video going viral, the impossible citation likely would have been processed as a completely valid conviction.
Which brings us to a really crucial analytical pivot here.
Right, because I know what some of you are probably thinking.
A listener reviewing this timeline might logically ask,
Oh, yeah.
why go through all of that effort?
Why spend a quarter of a year fighting online portals, filing records requests, and doing national television interviews over a traffic ticket?
Especially one that carries a base fine of just $116.
Right. Why not simply pay the fine, accept the nominal hit to the driving record, and reclaim those 3 months of your life?
It seems like the easier path.
But the personal injury perspective here is vital. And this is where the analyses from the Florida personal injury attorneys Ilabaka Law and Stephen G. Lively really change the narrative.
Because that $116 ticket is actually a catastrophic liability trap.
A liability trap. Expand on that, because this connects the abstract annoyance of a traffic ticket to devastating real-world financial consequences.
Okay, so distracted driving is a massive public safety crisis in Florida. The FFP law data shows that in 2022 alone, distracted driving was cited as a factor in 54,895 crashes across the state.
54,000 crashes. That's huge.
Resulting in over 2,600 serious injuries and 275 fatalities.
Wow.
Because of those numbers, insurance companies and civil courts treat these distracted driving citations as highly combustible evidence.
The danger lies in this legal concept called negligence per se.
Right, negligence per se. Let's explain how Florida auto insurance works. Florida operates under a no-fault auto insurance model.
Meaning your own insurance pays out first.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Your personal injury protection coverage handles your initial medical costs up to $10,000, regardless of who actually caused the collision.
But $10,000 doesn't go very far if you're really hurt.
No, it doesn't. If a driver suffers severe injuries requiring long-term rehabilitation or surgery, they must step outside that no-fault system. They have to file a civil lawsuit against the other driver to recover those major damages.
And to win that civil lawsuit, they must prove the other driver was legally at fault.
Now, here is where the ticket comes in. If you possess a citation for texting while driving, that citation functions as negligence per se.
Meaning the court presumes you acted negligently simply because you violated a statutory safety law.
Exactly. You broke a safety rule, therefore you were negligent.
So let's synthesize this for the listener. Let's walk through a hypothetical scenario to demonstrate how this works in practice.
Okay, lay it out.
Imagine you are driving home from work and you get rear-ended at a red light by a massive commercial truck. You suffer a severe spinal injury. It seems completely straightforward, right? You were stopped, the truck hit you, it's their fault.
Right.
But let's say earlier that year, or maybe even at the scene of the crash itself, a confused officer dealing with a complicated drop-down menu issued you a texting citation.
And you just paid the $116 to make the headache disappear.
Exactly. You didn't want to deal with online court, so you just paid it. Well, by paying that fine, you legally admitted guilt to the infraction.
You pled guilty to distracted driving.
Right. So during the civil litigation for your spinal injury, the defense attorney representing the trucking company's massive insurance firm discovers that paid citation.
Oh, and they will absolutely weaponize that admission of guilt.
Instantly. They will argue to the jury that because you were legally distracted, as proven by the citation you willingly paid, you may have stopped abruptly, or drifted in the lane, or otherwise contributed to the conditions that caused the collision.
They will use the ticket to shift the narrative of fault away from the truck driver and onto you.
And in Florida, shifting the narrative of fault has absolute devastating consequences right now due to recent legislative changes.
This is where Florida's House Bill 837 comes into play.
HB 837. This is a game changer, isn't it?
It fundamentally altered the landscape of personal injury litigation in the state. Passed in 2023, it transitioned Florida from a pure comparative negligence system to a modified comparative negligence standard.
Okay, contrast those two systems for us.
Under the old system, the pure comparative one, if a jury found you were 90% responsible for an accident, you could still sue the other party for the remaining 10% of your damages.
So if your medical bills were $1 million, you could still get $100,000 even if it was mostly your fault.
Exactly. But under the new modified standard established by HB 837, the threshold is absolute.
What's the threshold?
50%. If a jury determines that you are more than 50% at fault for your own injuries, you are completely barred from recovering any damages whatsoever. Your recovery drops to zero.
Wow. So, going back to our hypothetical, the defense attorney uses your $116 paid traffic ticket to convince the jury that your distraction was the primary catalyst for the crash.
And if they persuade the jury to assign you just 51% of the blame,
Your $1 million claim for spinal surgery and lost wages evaporates instantly.
yeah,
You get absolutely nothing.
nothing at all.
So an officer's split-second erroneous click on a confusing software drop-down menu doesn't just cost you $116. It transforms a minor roadside inconvenience into a mechanism that can financially ruin a family after a catastrophic event.
The stakes of these low-level interactions are incredibly high. Legal professionals emphasize this constantly. Paying a questionable citation just out of convenience is a profound legal risk.
The bureaucratic machinery is purposefully structured to wear down your resolve. It wants you to submit.
But submitting carries secondary liabilities that can surface years later in civil court.
It is deeply unsettling to realize how precarious a driver's legal standing is during a routine stop.
It really makes you think twice about just paying a ticket to make it go away.
Absolutely. However, examining the aftermath of this specific incident with Katie Thomas does provide a measure of optimism.
Yeah, largely due to how she chose to navigate the viral fallout.
Her response was just incredible. It was a masterclass in targeting the systemic failure rather than seeking individual retribution.
Because when the video amassed millions of views, the cultural appetite was primed for outrage, right? People wanted the deputy fired.
Well, the internet always wants someone fired, but she actively dismantled that narrative.
She did. During her appearance on CBS Mornings, she exhibited remarkable grace. She refused to villainize the deputy.
Her exact phrasing was incredibly perceptive. She said, quote, "I don't think he was a bad person. I think he was a person trained to never be wrong in the moment."
That is just brilliant.
That single sentence perfectly distills everything we've talked about today. The cognitive anchoring, the escalation of commitment, the warrior-centric training model.
She correctly identified that the deputy wasn't being malicious. He was just executing the programming he received.
And she utilized the platform. She suddenly had to advance two highly specific objectives.
The first being the cultural normalization of limb differences.
Right. She aimed to demonstrate that individuals with physical differences are simply navigating their daily lives, just like anyone else.
And encountering them shouldn't induce a cognitive short circuit in authority figures.
Exactly. But her second objective was a direct policy demand.
She called for the urgent implementation of adaptive communication and disability awareness training within law enforcement curricula.
And the data supports the urgency of her demand. The Emerald Book analysis points to findings from organizations like the 2020 PB Project and the Witness Media Lab.
Which study police interactions and body cam footage.
Right, and their research confirms that incidents like the one in Lake Worth Beach are not anomalies. They are happening constantly.
With over 80% of local law enforcement officers in the United States now equipped with body-worn cameras, the sheer volume of recorded interactions is staggering.
It's millions of hours of footage.
Now, the initial theory behind the widespread adoption of body cameras was that the presence of the lens would alter behavior.
Like officers would know they're being watched, so they'd act better?
Yeah.
It would be a deterrent to misconduct.
Right. But the footage from this incident challenges that theory entirely.
Because the deputy was fully aware he was being recorded.
He knew the camera was on. The camera didn't prevent the escalation because the deputy genuinely believed his cognitive anchor was the objective truth.
And his training provided no off-ramp for him to reconsider that truth.
Exactly. The cameras are capturing millions of hours of these instances where rigid procedure just steamrolls over observable reality.
So the crisis is no longer a lack of transparency. We could see everything happening.
The crisis is an inability to process the transparent data. We do not have a camera problem. We have a training problem.
We have a massive training problem.
Mm-hmm.
So what does this all mean? What does this comprehensive breakdown mean for you, the listener, navigating the roads and the systems we've discussed today?
It means that informed vigilance is an absolute necessity.
We've traced the anatomy of a seemingly absurd traffic ticket all the way down to its psychological roots. We've examined the neurological friction that occurs when authority is challenged by reality.
We've contrasted the minimal, combat-focused training of American police with the extensive, academically rigorous models used internationally.
We've navigated the contradictory maze of Florida's distracted driving statutes. And we exposed how bureaucratic software design passes the burden of state errors directly onto the citizen.
And we mapped out the severe civil consequences of treating a citation as just a minor annoyance.
Right, demonstrating how a simple $116 fine can be weaponized under modified comparative negligence laws to deny you critical compensation following a severe accident.
The ultimate takeaway here is that the system is not designed to automatically catch and correct its own low-level failures.
It's just not. The administrative inertia is a feature, not a bug. It is designed to leverage your exhaustion.
So you must be prepared to be your own most vigorous advocate.
Knowledge really is a shield here. Understanding your state's specific laws, recognizing the psychological stubbornness of authority figures, and knowing how to navigate the bureaucratic system like demanding your own body cam footage through public records requests.
Those are essential tools for modern civic life. The burden of forcing reality back into the bureaucratic equation ultimately falls on you, the individual.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over today, something drawn from the sources regarding where this whole administrative machinery is heading next.
Oh, the AI aspect. This is fascinating.
The Emerald Book Source notes that because the volume of body cam footage being generated is way too massive for human review, departments are increasingly turning to artificial intelligence.
Right. They are deploying machine learning algorithms to automatically scan the video to flag errors or misconduct.
It is being marketed as the ultimate technological fix.
A scalable solution to a systemic problem.
But consider the mechanics of machine learning for a second. These algorithms are trained on massive data sets of historical interactions.
Data categorized by humans.
Yes. If the AI is trained on data categorized by human officers using the exact same confusing, flattened citation software we discussed today.
And if the algorithm's parameters are defined by an institution that fundamentally prioritizes procedural adherence over cognitive flexibility.
What will the AI actually learn? Will a machine learning model look at the footage of Kathleen Thomas and possess the human capacity to understand the contextual significance of a missing limb?
Or will the algorithm simply absorb the bureaucracy's existing biases?
Will it just become a faster, colder, infinitely more efficient version of the exact same rigid drop-down menu that initiated this entire cascade of absurdity in the first place?
It is the ultimate question of whether technology will correct human rigidity or simply automate it at scale.
It's definitely something to think about the next time you see a camera on a dashboard or a uniform. Thank you for joining us at the table today. Keep questioning the systems you interact with, and we will see you on the next deep dive.